It's another beautiful spring day out here, and I know that this is the last thing on most people's minds, but today, it's hay cutting day. That's what's going on today on Farmertylerranch. Today I'm going to be running the trusty old John Deere 4895. If you've been with the channel for any period of time, you've seen me run this machine before. I don't own this John Deere. I borrow it from a good friend, or rent it, I should say. And it might be old, it might have a lot of hours on it, and it might break down every once in a while, but one way or another, it always seems to get the job done. If you've never seen a machine quite like this before, or you maybe have seen one, but you're not quite sure how it works, they're actually pretty simple, and they're kind of ingenious in their own way. When we're out in the hay field, this part, known as the header, is going to be lowered down to the ground, and this reel here will be spinning around. And the purpose of that is it sort of like rakes the hay crop into the machine. As it's doing that, you have a bunch of little blades down here that are called sections, and they are going back and forth. It's like a bunch of little pairs of scissors, and they're all just cutting. And as you go into that hay, it's cutting all those hay stalks off and then combing them back into what is called a conditioner. Conditioner is well, on this machine they are metal drums. Some machines have rubber drums, but they have like intermeshing teeth, basically, is the way to think about it. And what that does is it crimps and crushes the hay, thereby cracking the stems, and the purpose of this is to help the hay dry faster. After the hay is sucked through the conditioner, it is then directed by these two wings here that help determine the size of the windrow. Last year, I thought my windrows were a little bit too wide, and I was having some issues with the tire on the tractor sort of crushing the windrow, and then it was really hard for the baler to pick it up. So this year, I've narrowed them up even a little bit more than I had them last year, and after we get out there and cut for a little while, we'll measure them and kind of see where we're at. So in a nutshell, that's how a swather works, or some people might call this a windrower. Let's get it out in the field and get started. What's kind of cool about these machines is that they have what's called hydrostatic steering. And that means that it doesn't use like a rack and pinion like your car does. It steers by changing the wheel speed of each front wheel, so you can pivot on one tire. I'll show you what I mean. The reason that these machines operate or steer that way is because it enables you to take this huge heavy machine out in a hay field and virtually never run over your hay crop once you cut it. The swather leaves nice fluffy windrows, and the purpose of that is you want to promote airflow through that crop. That's going to help it dry. If you run over the hay crop, you pack it and you squeeze all the air out of that. You create a tight spot there that's going to have a really difficult time drying. So we really want to try to minimize the amount of times that the tires roll over the windrow. All right, let's get the gate open. This is always when I wish that this gate was about 4 feet wider. Now, for those of you that may or may not remember, this year I planted Triticale out here in the field, and I've actually never planted it before. It's a wheat rye hybrid, if I remember right. And when you look at it, that's about what it looks like. So this crop is looking taller than my crop last year, but still not as good as we have seen in the past. I like to use myself as a gauge to measure height. The first year, just for some context, the first year I planted hay out here, the crop was as tall as me. Some of it was even a little bit taller. A normal year is probably at about, you know, just below my chin, chest height, I would say. Last year, it was knee high and below, which was terrible. And it looks like this year we're at about waist height. So it's a little bit better than last year, but not as good as it has been. Okay, so get in the cab here where you can maybe hear me. I'm gonna open the field up now, and I usually don't film when I do that because it's almost inevitable that if you're gonna have problems, it's usually on the first couple of passes when you're opening up the field. So I'm gonna do that and not worry about filming so I can pay attention to what's going on. And once we get going and everything seems like it's working well, then I'll get the cameras back out. Okay, so I said I wasn't gonna film, but I actually do have to stop here and measure the windrow. So let's see where we're at. Looks like we're at about 5 feet. I think last year I had it set at about 6 feet. So I think this is gonna be better. I kind of hesitate to narrow it any more than that because then it's gonna take a little bit longer for all of this to dry. And you know, it's kind of a balancing act. And I think if I set up my baler a little bit better, that we can sort of avoid some of the problems that we had last year. So I think I'm gonna leave it here and cross my fingers and hope for the best. So far everything's going pretty good. I mean, cross your fingers, we're not done till we're done, but the machine's holding up. The only thing that I've noticed that is not really that great is the yield is very up and down. Some spots of the field are really tall and look really good, and then other spots not so much. I think the second half of the field is going to yield a lot better just because the ground's a little bit better up there, and we didn't have a wild oat issue up there like we did on this side. So we're going to be in that pretty soon, and I'll know for sure. Yesterday was actually a very uneventful day of cutting hay, and that's exactly how I like it. No problems to speak of, no breakdowns, everything went almost impossibly well. I finished pretty late in the day and I didn't have a chance to move the swather back, so this morning I've got to do the part of this job that I probably hate the most, and that is I gotta blow this thing out and get it cleaned up before I return it. After I got done cutting my field, I went and cut a friend's. It was only like 1.5 acres, very small, right across the street, and he had something different planted out there, and I think I saw some ryegrass, and it was just really tearing up my allergies. So I'm not looking forward to blowing this out. I brought a respirator, hopefully that helps, but we got to get it done, so let's do it. All right, the swather is looking a lot better now than it was a few minutes ago. So I'm gonna run it back home and then we'll go back out into the hayfield and kind of talk about the yield, what we've got, and everything else. So this is our 2022 hay crop. I think that the yield is going to be better than last year, but it's one of those things you don't know what you have until you get it up into a bale. One thing that I will say though, and I think it might be specific to the Triticale, is that it cut really nice. And a lot of issues that I run into when I grow the forage mix, which is oats, wheat, and barley, is that it falls over and it sort of gets matted up on the ground. It makes it difficult to cut. And the other bad thing about that is you have all those stems that are laying down, and then the hay that lays on top of that doesn't cure very well. But the Triticale cut awesome. You can see the stubble on the ground is very uniform and upright, and that's exactly what I want to see. When the stubble's a little bit longer, like I'm showing here, it actually kind of works to hold the windrow up off the ground and allow some airflow to sort of circulate under the windrow and help it cure a little bit faster. Even with that being said, without tedding this or raking it, which is very uncommon for grain hay in this area, this will take between 7 and 10 days to cure. I know that the idea of not tedding or raking hay is pretty weird to a lot of people because that's so standard in many other parts of the country and the world. But we don't do that. In this scenario, we're gonna leave these windrows untouched and bale them up just as they are. So for me, that means that for the next week or so, I need to hope now for no rain and for some nice sunny days. Thanks for hanging out with me today, guys, and I hope I'll see you again on Farmer Tyler Ranch.